undermine what we're trying to do. But what we thought we would do is that maybe we each speak for maybe 5 minutes or so, very briefly, talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing, and then open it up for discussion. Because part of the thing, well, one thing that I think really interests us is whether what we've been doing in philosophy can be expanded outside of our sort of discipline. We don't see any reason why it couldn't be, but that would be very useful to hear from all of you how discussion works in your classes and how we could offer discussion as an alternative to some of the other more traditional forms of pedagogy. So I have a handout. Let me pass that on. And so I was just going to talk for a few minutes about what we've been doing. So for the last 2.5 years, we've been piloting discussion-intensive courses. And the first assumption is that discussion is a good thing. And the education there is actual evidence that it does. That when students have an opportunity to participate in discussions, they feel more engaged. There's some evidence that they have greater comprehension of the course material through the process of discussion. And then there are also higher level goods that discussion provides. That this is good civic practice for students to discuss among each other, to listen to each other, to present their views, to give reasons. That this is a necessary and important part of living in a democratic culture and other things as well. But despite the fact that we all love discussion is a great thing, it's not always clear in the literature what discussion is. And so if you look through the literature on discussion, you see a lot of different definitions. And I think some of these definitions are not completely adequate. So just to start out here by saying, well, what discussions are not. Some people say that interviews can be discussions, but the way interviews are often presented, they're not discussions, because the interview is one person asking someone else questions, usually without challenging the other person, and without a lot of collaboration. And discussions should be collaborative. Q&A sessions are not discussions. So standing up in front of the class and saying, well, does anyone have any questions? And then answering those questions, that's not a discussion either, because that doesn't really actively engage the class in the way a discussion should. And that's more just a way of knowledge transfer, not really encouraging understanding. Oral presentations are nice, they're great, but they're not discussions, because an oral presentation is also usually one way, and discussion should be interactive in the way that oral presentations are. Debates are a nice thing too, that can be helpful in the classroom, but that's not a discussion either, because debates are usually set up so there are two different sides, and there's a confrontation between one side and the other, and discussion should be more collaborative. It should be cooperative. That should be the ethos. And then finally, I think one thing that's a special occupational hazard, at least for some of us, is that it's easy to confuse a small group lecture with a discussion. So if I have a small group of students, but I'm basically lecturing to them and I'm sitting down, that's still not a discussion. That a small group lecture is obviously still a lecture. So what is a discussion? The definition that we're operating with is that it's a conversation. It's a conversational process where we try to build understanding. It's not just about knowledge transfer, it's really about trying to understand the text, the material, understand the positions of the participants. And we build this understanding by a process that's cooperative and it engages different points of view. So there is some give and take, there's giving reasons, there's listening as well as speaking, and this is what a discussion really is. Now that we have a definition of what discussion is, then what's discussion intensive? Lots of people do talk about a discussion-based course, which is usually a seminar. This is different. This is different because a discussion-intensive course does not have to be exclusively discussion. And moreover, we also spend time talking about what discussion is. There's a sort of a meta-level discussion about discussion that doesn't always take place in a seminar. Oftentimes when we have seminars, we assume everybody knows what they're supposed to do. But by being upfront from the beginning and multiple times through the semester, we can talk about this is why we're doing what we're doing, and are we doing it as well as we should be. So the sort of meta-level discussion about discussion is an important part of a discussion-intensive course as we've been developing it. We try to have clear criteria for what counts as a good discussion and for grading and assessing our students, for grading and assessing ourselves. And a lot of the criteria for a discussion-intensive course actually map onto the criteria for a writing-intensive course. So just as we think that writing-intensive courses are things that can take place across the curriculum and that are good for our students to have exposure to, regardless of their major, same thing with discussion. Being able to participate fruitfully in a discussion is a good skill for our students to have, regardless of what the topic is. And wherever they get that exposure, it will serve them well wherever they end up later after graduation or in their major, wherever it is. So that is just a thumbnail description of what our discussion-intensive courses are. Not only discussion-based. Discussion is an important part, but there can be other pedagogies built in. But we're also very self-conscious and upfront with the students about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we provide discussion and feedback and interaction on that topic itself. So when we think then about discussion across the curriculum, like we think about writing across the curriculum, ethics across the curriculum, we're thinking about these very general high-level skills that we then also model within the discussion. We're very intentional. We balance flexibility, open to the students taking the discussion where they want it to go, while also exercising some degree of oversight and control and direction where necessary. We try to keep the forest and the trees in sight at all times. And finally, the thought is that discussion is a large part of what we all do and what our students will do. But when they do it, it's going to be called meetings. And just as we know in our professional lives that there are good meetings and there are bad meetings, we would like our students to have some skill to be able to distinguish, like, well, when is a meeting on track and when is it not? What can I do as a professional to lead and participate in productive meetings? Because that is going to be a major part of their lives, just as it's for better or for worse, a pretty major part of our lives too, is having good meetings. So that's one of the takeaways that we hope the students will have. And then one last thing, on the back of this there are a couple of rubrics. So we've tried over the last year to make this more accessible, to show both that when we assess student performance that we're doing this carefully, but also that we're looking at the classes themselves and considering, well, what do we want the students to take away from the class? What kinds of skills we hope that they have? And so we've developed these rubrics and we've approved them to the department to give us more confidence that when we are leading discussions and we're assessing discussions, that we're doing it in a fair, objective, and consistent way across the entire department. And so that's sort of the framework we've been operating with as far as discussion courses go. I guess maybe, I think, Wade, you're going to talk more about, this is the theory part, but
examples? What do you want examples?
Some examples. Do you have any examples?
Yeah, I do, but I want to emphasize something that I don't think we've emphasized. No. One of the things I've discovered in having discussed it, I can't pronounce it, DI courses, is we're teaching people how to be courteous to each other. So I will inevitably get some, almost always a male, who interrupts a female who's in the middle of a conversation saying something. And what I will do is, this is time, we're taking a break, and I don't chastise the man. What I do is ask the female, what did you just let happen? And you handle it. It's not for me to handle. I'm not going to intervene here, but if you're going to handle yourself in a conversation in a civil way, you have to tell this person, I'm not coach. And it happened very early on, and after that, I had no problems. I actually had females go like that. Time, I'm not done yet. So, I mean, it's a very effective thing. The other thing, and this I noticed when I was doing a number of NEH summer institutes, summer seminars, and I was one where there were 20 philosophers and 20 lawyers. Talk about a bad combination of people. But we had people like Charles Freed in there, and I knew that the group had unified when somebody asked a question and Freed deflected it, and somebody else said, well, I had another question, but you didn't answer this question. it's the follow-up. And so one of my chores as somebody, as part of the discussion, is to intervene in that kind of case. And again, I do this. Do you want to start a new topic? Or are you finished with this topic? And then somebody else will go on. The other thing to add is you need at the end a summary of what happened. Somebody has to do it. I usually ask a student to tell us what went on during the discussion. I was telling John, I have a friend who teaches philosophy for children, and he has a wonderful hour-long discussion between 5- and 6-year-old kids on whether humans are animals. And it's like a Socratic dialogue. It is so well done. There is one kid who keeps insisting they are, and everybody else is against it. And they keep giving examples that would exclude humans from the range of animals, and he always keeps trying to examples. And it goes all the way through to the end when he finally convinces everybody, yeah, I guess we're sort of like animals, all right? It's nicely done. The important lesson from that, you gotta learn not to say anything. You can't intervene. Let them do it. And what you will discover is if they go astray, somebody will pull them back eventually. Somebody will say, what are we talking about? And then somebody else will say, well, we were talking about this, but we got off on this topic. And it's self-correcting. The correcting can take more time than sometimes it does. So the hardest part for me is keeping my mouth shut, not saying things. So let me give you a couple of examples of what I do. I'm teaching with Sarah Brunel, people in engineering, a course called Freshwater Grand Challenges. And part of what we're doing in that course is we give them reading assignments that have to do with issues right around water, for Flint, for example, Colorado River, for example. And they have to write little micro essays, one-page summaries, what's in the article that they wrote. So it's relatively rigorous. We want the thesis, we want the arguments for the thesis, we want, if there are any obvious objections, we want the objections. We then have discussion in class about this. And everybody's read the article, everybody's done a micro essay by this time. And the discussions are wonderful. They go at it, and these are first year with very few exceptions, maybe 3 people, not engineers. These are first year engineering students. And they're wonderful discussions about what are the implications of Colorado River socially. And one of the implications is people sell their water rights. What's an implication of that? Well, there's one town south of Denver which nobody lives at anymore because everybody sold their water rights, all right, to a suburb in Denver. Nobody has any water. So that's one thing we do, and we do it in engineering. And the aim is there to get the students to begin to think about some of the social implications of the various ways in which we distribute water and other things. I've actually taught symbolic logic in discussions, and this may sound like a really odd thing to do, but the hardest part in teaching symbolic logic is symbolizing the statements that people make, putting it into another language. So the students have a logic problem in front of them. I ask for volunteers, and somebody gets appointed to go up to the board, and then they talk about how to symbolize it and how to prove it. And I usually don't say anything at all. The students are really, really helpful. They learn a lot from each other. We've got some really bright students. It's sort of embarrassing to me how bright some of them are. Much better than I am at many things. And if you let them talk, they'll correct each other, and they do it in a civil way, and they'll learn a lot. So I'm curious about whether people have had experiences in other disciplines doing discussion intensive courses. I know some people think that some disciplines are not appropriate for this. And I find that kind of hard to believe, but I'm willing to be corrected. not going to say anything. I
Right.
already told you that. I warned you. I'm not going to say anything.
I haven't done it yet. That's the reason this appealed to me, is because I'm embarking on it right now.
Wow. Okay.
So let me throw a scenario out and then get some feedback. So I teach new media design. So these are third year undergraduates. And so new media design is designing apps, websites, this kind of thing. And this specific class is interaction. So you can think of this as, how do you get where you're going in an application, okay, on your phone, or how do you navigate a website? That's what we do. And there's some theory behind it, and there is some process behind this. We don't just make it up willy-nilly. So these guys had some good fundamentals in this because they're already a third year. We are embarking on kind of I'll use the word experimental. It's an area that's not yet familiar to us in user interaction design. None of us as users. Autonomous vehicles, right, which we know are coming down the road. And how
So to speak.
Yes, no, yes, sorry. Pun unintended. So we have to define the scenarios that we are then going to design for. These scenarios do not yet fully exist because the cars are not yet built. Even the definition of how, the expectation of how long this is going to take ranges from 5 years to never in terms of getting this. But so what I want the students to do, and I've got about 30, and what I want them to do is read articles. There's lots of writing going on about this. So I'll give them 3 or 4 articles to go out and read, and then to come back and hash out what we think is a reasonable direction to then pursue. So I can load them up with material. I've got all sorts of ideas in my head, but I need to back away from it. But it's, how do I foster that discussion? And I have a couple of specific notes. It's intelligent to do this all 30 or break it into small groups, but then not everybody's getting everything. So you think, yes, smaller groups.
I'm trying to imagine.
Right. Well, to me, people are going to be stepping all over each other. Right. So that's one. And then the other is, how do I get the quiet ones to come out, and how do I get the loud ones to shut up? So make room for the others.
Are they writing anything when have they come in with writing in hand? They've just read it.
These are new media students. I'm not going to ask them to write.
Okay.
It's not going to be productive. It's more that they have thoughts, ideas. They may have some notes, but I'm not asking them to write a paper.
Well, one of the advantages of the writing is that I know that everybody's
Yes.
read the material, and I don't necessarily know that otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a wonderful example of a student who talked about Mr. Cart. Mr. Cart did this, Mr. Cart did that, Dan Cart. He clearly had not, it was on Descartes, clearly had not read the material already. He sort of vaguely had some idea of what Mr. Cart was talking about. So one of the advantages is you guarantee the people who read it. I don't know, how do you handle the opinions who talk and don't talk?
I'm curious what everyone has to say about it. So there's a couple of thoughts. So it divides up. It's like a fork in the tree. So the students who talk too much, some of them have really good things to say. Some of them are okay, so I deal with them differently. And the ones who have good things to say, sometimes they say them in a really good, constructive, helpful way. And sometimes they mansplain. And so I want to deal with them differently too. So if someone has lots of great things to say and says them well, and the ways that we can engage and involve everyone, usually pretty much hands off, and just hope that everyone else kind of rises to their level, in which case their role is going to naturally level out. That's the hope. But if they're mansplaining or they're full of BS, then I call them on that publicly or privately, the situation. So that's one thought. Then you've got the students who are too quiet. Some are okay with that, and I think are genuinely and sincerely okay with that. And those students I mean, I'll ask them, what can I do? Is there something I can do to get more involved? And they're like, no, this is fine. And I usually don't press them too long. But if there's students who really do want to get involved, but are having trouble with them, my experience, it depends on the class, depends on the topic, lots of variables, is that I will approach them. I'll usually send them an email out of class, one that I'd like to call the next class meeting.
Okay.
I don't call them cold because I don't think that's fair to them, but I would say, I'd really like to call on you next class meeting. And then they know. And I try to do that within the first 2 or 3 weeks of class, because then the habit gets formed. If I wait until the midterm, then everyone's no one's expecting to hear from them. It just makes the dynamic much more difficult. If I can get to them in the first 2 or 3 weeks, and I call them, then they get into the habit of doing things they do all the time. They hear their voice. This is my sense of it. They hear their voice, and then they can be more comfortable chiming in without my active encouragement. And those are some. I don't know. I mean,
What are your class sizes?
for these classes, they've been 19.
You want to know
19.
why?
You're lucky.
We owe the U.S. News and World Report. That's their size for a small class.
They keep track of how many classes have 19 or fewer.
Yeah.
So right, in their rankings, that's one of the
right.
things
So
that are, okay, so
RIT
that metric is.
That's right. RIT
is
wants to have a
abandoned.
lot of small classes. So we have 19.
Yeah. So I mentioned mine is 30, but really what it is it's 2 sections and a combined lecture. So
Okay, so you really need 28, don't you?
well, they're 15. They're actually it's kind of weird because it actually breaks out to 17 and 12.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's not bad.
Right, but I don't want to have the discussion combined so that everybody's getting to hear where things go. So that's to me the benefit of the larger group, but there's a dynamic that's going to happen there that is going to be harder to control. And
You can still have discussion with large numbers, but each student isn't obviously not able to contribute as much as they would to a smaller group.
Could you have small groups and discussion and then they report to each other?
that was my that's what I was thinking was where I would go. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask about is, do you have many students that are non-native speakers of English?
We have some.
And do they have a harder time participating? Do you find this or not? So, do you scaffold them in any way?
Well, I'll give you an example. I had a guy from Saudi Arabia this past year, the past semester, and he actually came to me. They had to give a oral presentation on that. I have to do it twice. And he said, I can't do it. So why can't you do it? Because I don't speak English, so I can't do it. And they're going to laugh at me. They said, here's what you should do. You get up first and you say, as you can hear, I don't speak English very well. So when I make a mistake, you appreciate you helping me. And he was great. He actually did a wonderful job. So that
To be fair,
yeah,
presenting is not the same as discussing.
that's true. But then he started discussing.
So it kind of broke the
They
ice
broke
for
the
him.
ice and allowed him to begin. They do a presentation early on in this particular course. They broke the ice and allowed him to talk. I haven't had, he was probably worse in terms of being able to speak distinctly. Everyone else seems to be able. I haven't had any trouble with other students, so, but that's my normal way of handling it. Either pull them aside and talk to them, and try to encourage them. I mean, you're not going to become better at speaking English if you can speak English, so just tell them. I'm not a native speaker, if you can't tell already, all right? So give me some help.
That was hard of yours.
I haven't had any in these upper level courses. I've had a few before. I haven't had any for quite a long period of time. I don't know what the is. There, I sometimes have to rely on the interpreter to tell me what the person, some of them are very articulate, no problem. Others, I can't comprehend them, and so the interpreter will pass it on. But then it's just, I'm listening to the interpreter now, so
You do have some evidence that's almost anecdotal for deaf and hard of hearing students in these DI courses. So it's probably been 2 or 3, and it is much more difficult. Because, for the reasons you'd expect,
Delay.
Yeah, there's the lag. So that is definitely one of the challenges. Based on a few students who've been in a few of these classes, they have difficulty following the ebb and flow and the emotion of the conversation.
One thing I was going to say about the best kind of course I've ever had with that discussion is where each section builds on the next section. So this is going to be a philosophical example, sorry. We do Hume's dialogues. There are 12 of them. So the very first couple of sessions are spent discussing the background of this, and then a student presents the first dialogue. And there's a critique of it. The student presents a critique of it. The person doing the second dialogue can't do the second dialogue. They don't understand the first dialogue. So I had one student interrupt the class that we were all getting up to leave, yelling to us that we couldn't leave yet. It's like, class is over, we gotta leave. And he said, I don't understand the first dialogue, and I'm doing the second one. Okay, let's stop, let's wait, make sure he's with us. And that's a very effective incentive to make sure people actually take part in the discussion, because they can't do what they're going to be doing if they don't understand what's going on.
What I've kind of considered as the incentive is that what we're going to be doing is kind of defining the terrain that we're going to operate in.
Right.
If you have any interest in directing that, then you better speak up. Where are we going to dinner? You better say something, or you're not going to like where we're going.
Right. Which is why you're going to have some passive students.
Right.
I'll go over it again.
That's okay. At this stage, I'm not using it as grading.
Yeah.
There isn't a grade riding on discussion. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, one thing I did this past semester was I let them decide what grade. I said, it's your choice. You've got a major paper to write. I hate to have an exam in the middle of the semester because we're doing stuff that doesn't lend itself well to it. But you're not going to know what I'm doing unless you have some. So I said, you guys figure it out. Send me emails. Tell me what you want to do. And then we had like a half an hour discussion on how they wanted to be graded. And it turned out they wanted 15% of each session. I said, fine. And I had one student at the end who did very well, never took part. And he wrote me and said, well, I didn't get a C+. And I said, well, take 15 points off for not taking part in discussion. That gives you an 85. And you can do the rest of it yourself.
You forgot about that feature.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he did. He completely forgot about it. But, he was part of the discussion. So sometimes you pay a penalty for not taking part in where it's going to go.
Given that I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work, I'm not putting any weight in terms of grade weight on it.
Right.
You get the,
Well, I wasn't planning on it. They decided. I didn't. I had no requirements whatsoever except I wanted the paper.
well, how did not everybody said 15%? So how did you arrive at 15%?
They voted on it.
Oh, they voted.
They voted on it. Yeah, we ended up having. We had a big discussion, and I said, "Here's what we seem to have agreed to." And somebody objected to something, so I said, is this okay? You want to change it? They changed it or left it all the way through again, and they voted on the full package. So the major paper got it 40%. We could get a D, didn't turn it into everything else exactly right, which I didn't like particularly. You should break in. It's time to walk over here.
No, don't want to interrupt. I guess my question is centered on, kind of look at your rubric on the back. How do you go from the upper left corner down, over to the right, where you have, a few students speaking, professors carrying the burden, and so on? and get them to participate when, I'm sure you've had discussions where it is just awkward, painful, they're quiet, they, I don't know whether they had something bad for breakfast or what, but they just don't want to get involved in that. I mean, and sometimes it's the questions you ask to start the discussion, but what are some of the tips for dealing with that ahead of time?
Could I don't want to talk too much, but one of the things I do in every course to break the ice at the very beginning is I give them a quiz the very first day. And I make the analogy, it's like Monty Python, the Holy Grail, is the rabbit is going to ask you a question. What's your eye color? What's your favorite eye color? What's your favorite color? It's a very simple quiz. The 4 questions. The first question is, my dog is white or black? My dog is not white. Therefore, sure.
I think so.
You only think so. You're not sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm waiting for a trick here.
We usually end up having a big discussion about maybe it's black and white, or what's the or mean, but I say, if you had to make a choice, your life depended on it, what would you choose?
Black.
Okay. What color is my dog?
Black.
Everybody agree?
I want to go back to the discussion again.
Either black or white, not either white or black, I guess, not white, therefore black. That was the first question. Now the second question is what color is my dog?
Only if you assume the second question has the first as a prerequisite.
But why do you say that?
Because he's an engineer.
Yeah, but I mean, suppose I agree, it is, we're assuming they're connected to each other, then what would you say?
Black.
Black. Everybody agree?
Ours is the wrong answer.
You think it's the wrong answer?
Your
The way-
feedback
yeah,
is
the
indicating
feedback.
that.
Exactly. It's the distinction between soundness and validity. So you knew the answer to the first question because you were just completing the logical inference. I didn't say the premises are true. I don't even know if I have a dog. Right? The elephant in this room is purple or white. Purple, therefore it's white. So what color is the elephant in this room? And they end up discussing. I've had one student accuse me of, you lied to us. I didn't say anything, I just wrote it up on the board, all right? And then the third question is, how'd you know the answer to 2? And it turns out they didn't, usually. And then the fourth is, how'd you know the answer to 1, which turns out to be, if they had denied the obvious conclusion, they would have contradicted themselves. They get deeply involved in the discussion at the very first time, right away. And I start this by doing Monty Python, the argument. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not.
But I mean, every class is different in a different topic.
No, I understand that, but so the point is to structure it in a way that gets them taking part in it.
And that's,
at the very beginning.
and that's the challenge. And
Yeah.
how do you do that when you're always working with different materials? And I'll start out with having them do some reading overnight. I have them do a reflective reading assignment, so they've already written down and turned in what's the, main point, what questions do you have, what's left unanswered, those types of questions. And, you can ask the question and one person will respond and it's just kind of quiet. Yeah, I agree, and I said we just get situations where it's just,
Can you,
you don't want to talk.
okay.
Whether it's because of the topic not being interesting or being skimmed the paper or.
Surprisingly, all faced, and I'd just be really curious what strategies people have developed for breaking that ice.
I mean, my strategy has been to always start with students working in small groups. So I use a discussion-heavy focus in my psychology of women class. I find that it works really well there. I always start off in smaller groups. I always get students talking, so same thing, they read an article, they bring their discussion questions, they bring their response. And they'll always talk in small groups, so we come back together, and then we, as a whole group, discuss the topic and their responses. So I find that I always have to start to break the ice kind of into a small.
How many students?
It varies. Sometimes it's a very small section, so maybe 10 students. Sometimes up to closer to 25, 26. It varies by semester.
But then how big a group?
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. For a small group. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, so,
Oh,
okay, so you've got
yeah.
10, 2 groups
Yeah,
of
yeah.
5, 25, 5 groups of 5.
Yeah. So, for example, this semester it's a small group, so I think there are around 12 students. So I would have them break into groups of around 3 or 4. Yeah, it's a small group. But that's been my approach.
One thing else you might do is, you're leading the discussion, right?
I'd like to start it off and carry through, but
Force one of the students to lead it. Just make an assignment. This is your first assignment. Mary, you're going to lead the first discussion, tell us what was said, what the arguments were, what your takeaway is. And everybody else should help her, because she's going to get graded on that, what she does. It takes you out of the mix. Not that you look like a big authority. There is that's going on part of it.
how many students?
Oh, okay.
Now, by the time they take this class, they've had me twice already.
Oh, okay. So they know.
They know.
They know. But one of the things that it takes you out of the mix, which may be all that's needed to get them going. And one of them has to talk. If you make an assignment, that's your assignment, is to come in and tell us what this person said. Read this article by so-and-so. We don't want to have to read it. It's too long. So you tell us what was said. You're looking very hesitant.
No, I'm
Thinking about.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I just shifted this semester from critical reading responses to reflective reading responses, but making the students present and lead a discussion. And we've only had 2, because I modeled a couple, and then we've had 2, and there's 2 more on Thursday, and they have been, I dare say, almost brilliant. They've completely jumped in, the 2 groups in groups of 2s. One created a Jeopardy game, one is doing film clips and then just, quizzing people on it, and it's only been twice, but it's been really, really, really
That's
effective.
great.
So,
Which class
so
is
far. This is first year writing,
First year writing.
which has a lot of reticent students who do not want to participate in a class they have no desire to be in and
Heaven forbid.
imagine that, and see no inherent value in at the beginning.
Sure.
So the first 2 were, I'm going to assume, people who wanted to jump in. And it may trail off, or how'd you choose who's playing?
Not really. I mean, I passed the sheet around and I said, those who are going first, you are the guinea pigs, and people signed up for it. So
But they self-selected.
they did self-select. Yeah.
I'm thinking about this, that the thing I came away with is kind of draft leaders to get yourself out of the discussion. And then, who do I draft? First I said, I'm going to draft the ones who were talking too much. But now I'm actually thinking the other way, that I'm going to actually draft those quiet people, because it's going to kind of pull them out of, they don't have to talk that much, they just have to push things.
When I've led seminars, I told them that the person who was leading could, if they thought about their job as getting other people to talk, they would talk less. So to prepare with that in mind.
Right. That's a good idea.
I was going to say, one of the, in this freshwater course that Sarah and I are teaching, they divide into teams, just like senior design, and they're actually doing something. And what has happened last year, it happened this fall, is that natural leaders emerged from the teams, out of the teams. We didn't appoint anybody. We didn't select anybody. It turned out that the 3 best teams last year, the very quiet female members of the team, took over, right, which was great. I mean, they really did. One of them came to me and said, they're just not doing the stuff they should be doing. I said, well, who's driving them? Nobody. I said, well, she went, okay, if I have to, I guess I have to. It was a great team. She was the leader. So part
Was
of
it a team or did she do it?
No, the team did it. They grade each other on the team. So they have 2 grades. 2 times they do that. Is everybody in the team taking part and doing what needs to be done? And in order to get phase, you got everybody going. They needed direction. Nobody was willing to take charge of who was doing what. So I'm hesitant to pick people because I think what happens is that out of a team of say 4 or 5 people, somebody will end up being the natural. One team we had 3 leaders, and it was fine. It was a great team. It all worked. But you have to have the teams working together before that.
So the class that Bill and I teach is called Contemporary Issues in Mechanical Engineering, and we have a couple things we've implemented.
You're doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. And we've incorporated a couple different things that might touch on a couple. It's not the best thing since sliced bread, but we have a group of about, it's always packed, it's about 34 to 35 students. We break them up into groups of 5 or 6 typically, so we have the smaller groups. And kind of to Wade's point, with having a pre-reading and having some sort of summary so they read it, we use the online discussion board and post. So we will have a brief article or something that they will have to read. Let's say it's available on Monday. By Thursday at noon, you will have read that and made your initial post. It's not a long post, but then those groups would only have access to their group mates or group members. And by the way, we select the groups we don't let them self-select. So I can kind of cherry pick, make sure that there's enough. So that's right or wrong, we do that. And then so by Thursday they have to have their first post. And on Friday, they are to read each other's posts. So they have a general sense of the group before they even get together legitimately, formally for the first time. We have some leading questions that then help drive that Friday in-class discussion. And it's been evolving, but I think it touches on a couple of the issues and points that have come up. And so we also have the very first week of class. These are 2-week discussion experiences. And so let's say there are 5 or 6 students in a group. We maybe have 5 or 6 discussions throughout the semester, and I say, okay, here is for each of the discussions, there's going to be one facilitator, a person that's responsible for keeping you on track, kind of giving them that opportunity, and 2 synthesizers. Basically, they're responsible for the final discussion summary that's delivered 2 weeks henceforth. So I say I'm not going to micromanage this. You figure out who's going, and you're going to rotate. Each of you will have this role, a couple times throughout the semester. So it's worked out pretty well. It's certainly not the perfect scenario, but it touches on a couple of things that have been brought up here, and it's kind of incorporating a couple different aspects.
What works well? What's less than perfect?
Oh, boy. I think so. What I think works well is that I'll say the pre-read and the initial post, so that first Friday discussion is fruitful, because not only do I know what I summarize, but I can also get a sense of other folks before we get together, and then they're leading questions that we have intentionally set up to push the discussion forward on that Friday. Then at the end of that class, the first Friday we call it, we have a reflective post. So, the key takeaways, again, it's not an enormous amount of work, but to see, is there additional work that you're going to be signing up for, action items, key takeaways from that class. And then the following weeks, it's a 2-week experience, we have an additional extension to that discussion. So it's worked out, I think that's worked out fairly well. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the best parts of it, is because, for instance, one of our discussion topics will be hybrid vehicles. So the first week, they'll be assigned a couple of articles, and to do some research, there's some questions, that they need to answer, as well as pulling the key points out of the articles. And then as part of their first in-class discussion, basically they have to assign what questions do we need what questions we still need answers to in order to complete the assignment. And so then they have to divide up the remaining research. And then as part of the reflective post, they not only have to give, their take on what happened in class, but they also have to articulate, here's my action item that I will post on by Thursday in preparation for next Friday's discussion. So putting that little bit of extra structure on it seems to have worked well. And the small groups kind of helps with the, I tried doing large discussions in the predecessor to this class when I would have, 25 to 30 students. And, again, I always ended up hearing from, the gregarious 6 and the other.
You had 6?
out of 30. And everybody else would just sort of nod their head, and that would be it. So by limiting the number of students, I think that was one of the best things we did in this particular course.
What level? I may have missed.
This is third year.
Yeah, third, fourth. Yeah.
So and the course is kind of it's a mixture. We teach it in different flavors. So I teach an automotive centric one. Rob Stevens teaches an energy and environment centric one. But it also covers a lot of the soft skills for that have difficulty finding homes in the rest of the engineering curriculum. Economics and ethics, and this is our writing intensive course.
Right.
It very much has turned into a catch-all course, which is probably simultaneously the best and worst thing about it.
The Steve Day teaches.
Yeah, Steve Day taught it as well.
For the bio flavor.
Well, it sounds like a good way of structuring that particular course.
Yeah.
Does it hurt that you've got different people teaching, or each person's teaching 2 weeks? Is that what happens?
So what's kind of interesting, so it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday meeting. So Monday we're co-located. So all the sections have the general content, we'll call it. Engineering economics is going to be applicable to anybody that's taking the course, any section. Then the Wednesday and Friday you would meet in your own specific classroom for your flavor. And then just copy, paste, repeat.
So we do have a lot of guest lectures, but that's limited to the Monday general content.
Gotcha.
I actually find, a lot of, trying to get the quieter students to speak up. I find the smaller group sections does seem to help that. If anything, given that, in my section last semester, I had 6 discussion groups going on simultaneously, relatively small classroom, and just trying to keep the slightest bit of awareness of what every group was doing, was a challenge. Just circulating around the room and eavesdropping on them to get around to all 6 at least once, and then I had 2 groups that would, they'd start off good, and then the discussion would go off into the weeds. And so by the time I had got back around to them to eavesdrop and realize that they're way off topic, 15 minutes or more has gone by.
But they have a product to produce at the
They
end
do
of
have a
this?
product to produce at the end of the 2 weeks.
Okay.
And to follow up on this idea that on Monday you have everybody together, I'm curious, because you mentioned here in the handout, John, that discussions don't have to be the sole means of pedagogy, and I'm wondering, for those of you who might have experience with using discussions, how do you mix it in? Do you is it 2/3? Is it the whole shebang, or what works best? Is there a formula? A percentage? Any advice you have for people interested in exploring it more?
Again, I'm curious how the rest of us deal with this. I think a lot of it varies from day to day. Came up earlier. Some days just are flat. Why are they flat? Sometimes it's because career fair is taking place, or it's because the reading was challenging. So I think one of the nice things about the discussion constant model is that it frees us up So if we have to give a lecture, if we just need to fill the gaps, if it's clear that the students did not get, what they wanted to get out of the assigned reading, we can go and try to clear things up as best we can, or do some other form of pedagogy too. But it's tricky to diagnose. You've got a reading that you think is going to be, you're just going to take off from, and then it's dead. Why is it dead? It's going to be really difficult to diagnose.
For our class, it's 35%. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I didn't see your hand.
No, it relates, no.
Say that. Just quickly, 35%, there's nothing magical about that, but it's about a third of the course. But one thing, I didn't want to forget this, I can't stress enough how important it is to have a well-structured rubric in place early on immediately if you're doing this, because it can create or eliminate a lot of questions and uncertainty with respect to expectations. So, whatever you're going to do, if you're going to be doing discussion, I highly recommend that you put a lot of thought into the rubrics up front for evaluation.
I'm trying to say that I try to create either 2, sometimes 3 different components of each class. Even the 55 minutes, we've got 2 or 3 different things going on. And the thing that can get truncated if necessary is always last. So that I may present something briefly, then there's a small group discussion, there's a big group discussion. I put the chairs in circles if at all possible, not always possible. But that brings me to something else. I stopped after 15 years giving participation points this year, and I have seen no change in behavior. And that was always often a point of contention because there's some subjectivity there as why did I get 8 points and I know my friend got 9 points and that could make or break a grade. And I have seen no behavioral change since I stopped giving participation points, meaning a grade attached to it. None, 0. So just throwing that out there. I don't know if others have tried, experimented with that, but I'm not going to do that anymore.
How much was it before?
Usually 15. Usually, yeah.
Speaking of rubrics, this class meeting level rubric on back, who and when in these DI courses uses that rubric?
I'm going to hand this out also in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the semester so that they can see what I'm hoping for. Then secondly, what we've been doing in the department we've been using this to assess a class meeting. So if today's class meeting was 2. So if we can see if there's been some development over the course of the semester, so that in the semester we're more consistently getting 3s and 4s rather than 1s and 2s.
So this is
ebbs and flows.
Peer observation of the class. Is that what you're
Well,
doing?
we've been doing self-assessment.
Self-assessment?
Yes, we've been doing self-assessment.
Interesting. That started off really badly.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned the importance of summarizing discussions. So, are any students summarizing, what happened in the class, and are they, using this to say?
I don't know that they're using, when I ask the students to summarize them, they're usually appointed, they usually sign up for summarization. They all have to do it this time. I don't know that they've got this in mind. What the summary is for is the discussion often meanders. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to go off on a track and eventually somebody's going to flip back. The summary is, what did we get out of this? What's the takeaway? And what are the unanswered questions? What was the stuff we didn't get to that we also got to? And so they have to write this. It goes to the rest of the class, and we might pick it up the next time. It's a really important thing, but at least they feel like it wasn't just meandering around all over the place. There's usually a thread that runs through, and the job of the person summarizing is to figure out what that thread is.
Well, I'm sorry to say we're coming up to 1:30, which is the official close.
Could I say one more thing?
Sure, go on.
No, I don't want to summarize. I don't want to summarize. I want to answer a question. I want to answer a question about lecturing. I always lecture in response to a problem that arises in class. So I had my students this past year, they each gave a presentation of their final paper about 4 weeks before the end of the semester. And I had one student who thought it was an absolute requirement that such and such be the case. And I ended up having a lecture, almost 40 minutes, about the difference between prima facie and absolute. Do you really want to say absolutely with no exceptions whatsoever? And instantly the students came in and started giving exceptions. And he said, but what did I do wrong? Right? And then we had a discussion about what he did wrong and how he could have done it in a different sort of way. So I lectured, but I lectured as part of the discussion. And that's how I almost never give a lecture in class. It just never happens. They shut me up. As I am now.
No, so I mean, so John, Wade, thank you, and do you have, are you sponsoring any events or anything related
You're gonna
to
pass
this
this
discussion?
Greatest.
That we could know about, so if you would send that information to me, I will send it out to everyone here.
I should say that we do have a regular series, the Hale Elective series, and John is actually giving a talk in about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. I'll send out a note.
So not about this.
No, it's about truth and Trump or something.
Truth and
Yes, exactly. Now, you know that Stephen Day plays
Thanks, everyone.
in a band,
I
right?
do, yes, I'm very close to Steve.